Your electric bill came last month. You looked at it. Maybe you looked at it twice. The average American household spent $700 cooling their home last summer. In Arizona, that number is already past $1,000. Since 2019, the average electric bill in this country has gone up 23%. Not because you are using more. Because the summers keep getting hotter, the rates keep climbing, and there is not much you can do about either one. My name is Gideon Adkins. I was born in a holler outside Harlan, Kentucky, on land my grandfather cleared. I have watched this county lose a great deal, but the people who built in these mountains figured something out about heat 200 years ago that nobody ever told you. A way to keep a house cool all summer long. No electricity, no machinery. A saw, a plan, and the wind. Picture two log cabins sitting side by side on a hillside. Same timber. One roof covering both without a break. Between them, open air. A gap 10 feet wide running straight through from front to back. No wall, no door. Just shade and moving air. That gap is the whole idea. One pen was the kitchen. The other was where the family slept. The separation was not accidental. A fire that got loose in the kitchen had nowhere to go. The open breezeway stopped it cold. They called it the Dogtrot. Some places called it a dog run. Down in Louisiana, a possum trot. The name changed with the county, but the design never did, because the dogs understood it before anyone drew up a plan. On the worst days of August, when the sun was overhead and the fields were still, you would find them lying in that passage, flat on the ground, catching every breath of air, the coolest spot on the property. The dogs knew it. Eventually, somebody built a house around what the dogs already knew. It spread from the Tennessee hills all the way down to Texas because it worked. And because it worked, it has lasted. Think about a creek running down off a ridge, wide and slow in the flat bottom. Then it hits a narrow place between two rock faces and it speeds up. Same amount of water, just less room to move through, so it runs faster. Air works the same way. When the wind comes through that open breezeway, the two log pens on either side act like holler walls. They squeeze the air. It speeds up. Faster air feels cooler on your skin, and it does something else just as important. It pulls. As that column of air moves through the passage, it draws the stagnant hot air out of the rooms on either side through any door or window facing the breezeway. The rooms start to breathe. The engineers call this the Venturi effect. We just call it the way air moves between two buildings close together. Now look at the roof. One continuous ridge running over both pens and the breezeway between them. That roof is doing something most people miss. It shades the air in the breezeway before that air enters the rooms. The sun never hits the passage directly. The deep overhangs shade the exterior walls so the afternoon sun cannot get a grip on the logs themselves. The floor matters too. The house sits up off the ground on stone piers. Air moves freely underneath. The floor stays cool. Ground moisture cannot reach the wood, and the walls. Dense timber holds heat slowly. The logs absorb the afternoon sun for hours before the interior feels it. By the time they would give that heat back, the night air is already cool enough to carry it away. None of it works alone. That is the part worth understanding. The house faces the prevailing wind. The breezeway catches it and speeds it up. The roof shades the air before it enters the rooms. The floor lets cool air rise from underneath. The log walls hold the heat back for hours. The chimneys sit at each end, driving the stack effect up and out. The front porch shades the entry wall. The rear porch does the same. Every decision reinforces the one before it. And then the sun goes down. That is exactly when the Dogtrot does its second job. As the night air cools, it pours through the open breezeway, slow and steady. The heat the walls absorbed all day starts to give itself back. The night air carries it away. By morning, the logs have shed most of what they stored. The house starts the next day cool. Not air-conditioned cool. Cool the way a root cellar is cool. Steady and real. The families who lived in these houses moved their whole lives into the breezeway between 2 and 6 in the afternoon. That was always the coolest spot on the property. Not by accident. By design. Then the 1950s came. Air conditioning got cheap enough that a working family could afford a window unit, then a central system, and the whole philosophy of building changed overnight. You did not need the breezeway anymore. You did not need the orientation, the overhangs, the raised floor, the thick walls. You sealed the house up tight, bolted a machine to the side of it, and paid someone else to manage the heat for you. It was easier. Nobody argues that. But I have watched what happens when a skill stops being necessary. In this county, I have watched it more than once. It does not retire quietly. It disappears. The Dogtrot did not evolve into something else. It just stopped being built. Within a generation, most people had forgotten it ever existed. Here is what is strange. The architects found it. Not all at once. Quietly, over the last decade, firms started building Dogtrot houses again. Real ones. CLB Architects. Lake Flato. A studio in Arkansas called Modus that built one they named the Dogwood Trot. They were not doing it out of nostalgia. They were doing it because the numbers stopped making sense. Rising electricity costs. Hotter summers. A sealed mechanical box getting more expensive every year to run. A writer for Arch Daily put it plainly last May. Architects are revisiting the Dogtrot as a serious response to heat. Not a heritage curiosity. A working solution. The settlers who built in these hills were not behind the times. They were just working without a machine to hide behind. The architects finally noticed. You cannot build a Dogtrot this weekend. I am not going to pretend you can. But every principle that made it work is still available to you. In the house you already have. Right now. First, make a breezeway through your home. Find which direction the prevailing wind comes from in your area. Open windows on the 2 sides of the house that align with it, both at the same time. If you have a hallway running through the middle of the house, open the doors at both ends. You have just made a channel. Air will move through it the same way it moved through that log passage 150 years ago. It costs nothing. Second, shade before you cool. The Dogtrot roof kept the sun off the exterior walls entirely. An awning over a south or west-facing window does the same thing. So does a shade tree on the west side of the house. Heat you stop at the wall never reaches the room. Third, build your outdoor room. A covered porch facing the wind is the modern breezeway. It will run 5 to 10 degrees cooler than open sun during the worst afternoon hours. Move your life out there between 2 and 6. That is what those families did. The breezeway was the living room all summer. Fourth, add mass where you can. Tile floors, brick, concrete countertops. Dense materials absorb heat slowly and release it at night. Open the windows after dark and let the cool air carry the stored heat out while you sleep. Fifth, move the heat source outside. The kitchen pen was separated from the sleeping pen for a reason. Every BTU your stove generates inside the house is one your air conditioner has to remove. Use the grill. Run the dryer in the morning. Sixth, open low, exit high. Cool air comes in through the lowest openings. Warm air rises and leaves through the highest. The house resets itself every night if you let it. You do not need a machine for this. You need open windows and the patience to trust what moving air will do on its own. My mother Ruth kept a composition notebook. Garden records going back to 1952. Planting dates, moon cycles. Which beds held the morning shade. She never called it science. She called it what worked. The people who built the Dogtrot had no name for the Venturi effect, no term for thermal mass. They knew the dogs were cool and they were not, and they fixed it. They called it survival. The houses are still standing. Look at your home this weekend with what you know now. Where could air move through that it currently cannot? Tell me in the comments, what state are you in? How old is your house? Have you opened both ends of your hallway? I read every one. The knowledge is free. It has always been free. Next time, I will show you 10 Appalachian skills that keep your family alive when the grid goes down. I will see you there.